Sam, we are back, man. How you doing?
It's good to be back. It's always a good thing. How are you?
I'm good. You've been traveling a lot, seems like, lately.
Yeah, I'm really working my way up there to United 1K status again. So yeah, takes me where people need me. So
yeah, I lost my status this year. I'm kind of bummed about it. I'm working back to get it because I just didn't travel in the beginning of the year that much. So I need to get back to status, even though it's kind of nice not having travel status. So
if you have been to Intercontinental Airport in Houston recently, you will know that it's not a good place to be. So
that's true. A lot of construction. And I just heard that Southwest is pulling back out of George Bush Intergalactic Spaceport. So no more Southwest at IAH. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. So on the screen, the audio, however you're consuming this podcast, we have got two special guests, Rachel Schwalk and Mac. And Mac is Mac Foss.
Yep, correct. Yeah.
Right. And Rachel, did I say your last name right?
You did. You did great.
Awesome. Good. So Rachel and Mac, you were both, y'all spoke together at HOU.SEC.CON in 2023. I'm losing track of my years.
Yep.
About business email compromise. So we're going to talk about your talk today. I'm excited about that because business email compromise. I got a couple of little anecdotes that just from running HOU.SEC.CON that I can give.
Yeah, so, I feel like everyone does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's rampant. I appreciate you being on. But before we get into that, as usual, we're going to talk about HOU.SEC.CON, talk about the news, and then we'll get deeper into your talk and everything about Rachel and Matt. So, and by the way, their titles, detection engineers, both of them at Red Canary. So Red Canary is a partner with my day job. So I appreciate y'all being on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yep. All right. Well, Sam, we got a lot of HOU.SEC.CON stuff to talk about. First of all, HOU.SEC.CON is done, right?
We are sold out. And by the time this comes out, it'll be past it, right? But past the conference, it's for where we're doing this. 150 tickets sold for purely owner operators. That is who is in the room for this, and we limited it and vetted that just to make sure that we were putting the format together and the parameters around it being a very comfortable area for the owner operators to get together, both from the plant side and from the cyber side. And that was really important to try to help drive this conversation. So super excited to get rolling on that. We're only a few days away from this recording, and I'm sure I'm going to look a whole lot older on the next episode.
Yep. Yeah. Honestly, the biggest thing I'm worried about is getting our cool polo shirts that Lauren ordered. I'm very happy. I'm very excited about those.
Yes.
So, and official. We've got, what's that?
Oh, we're official. It's like official, logo wear, right? So
yeah,
nice.
We've also got HOU.SEC.CON user group coming up May 30th. The overlord of Zero Trust. I'm sure he'll like me calling him that. John Kindervog is coming down to speak. Very excited about that one. That'll be good. We just had Lynn No at the last one, and that one was really good. And then we've got HOU.SEC.CON on July 18th. So the full speaker list is out on that one. Everybody who wants to get tickets for that, we're kind of doing it the same way we did HOU.SEC.CON, curating that for the first one, but we're really excited about everybody having the demand for wanting to be at that conference as well.
Yeah. And for, and by the CFP's open for HOU.SEC.CON. So folks should be getting there. See if we're only leaving it open for 30 days this year. So it's not the longer term period. We want to get those selections done quicker and the agenda out faster for everybody earlier. So be sure to put those submittals in. We are looking forward to having to judge a whole bunch of them and see which, we always, it's really hard. It always is, but I can't wait to see what comes in this year.
Please submit again. Or you can, come in with a speaking slot with Red Canary. Well, however you can get there, but we'd love to have you back at HOU.SEC.CON 2024. So, okay. Anything else, Sam, for HOU.SEC.CON related?
That is all that my feeble mind can remember at this point.
It's all the things that Lauren put on our notes. Let's just put it that way. All right. Well, let's get into the news. So there was interesting news article out on, where was that from? That was from Dark Reading. And there's this, I want to say like attacks, and Rachel and Max, tell me if you agree with me here, but I see attacks as cyclical, meaning the type of attacks that get used are cyclical. So for the last, I don't know, however many years, we've been talking about how most of the attacks are malware driven. Then it was like, okay, now they're not malware driven, but they're they're using a vulnerability. And then they're living off the land, and they're using, tools that are already in your environment. So it's really a lot harder to detect those types of attacks. But what I had been comfortable saying is the attack vector of the network was very well defended. Like we had put firewalls in place. We had put intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. We had put network detection response devices. We had put all the malware detections that flowing over the network, like FireEye and those kind of things. We just put a lot of defenses there. And that's why you kind of saw, okay, we need to pivot with EDR to the endpoint, and then all of those things. And now what we're seeing, and this is not exactly what this article is about, but it just struck me, is we're seeing people going after VPNs and firewalls again. And the reason we're seeing that is not because they can get past the rule set or they can, somehow compromise a stateful firewall. They are using the vulnerabilities that are now popping up in those devices to use that as a vector of attack. And I mean, what we're going to be talking about with you guys is email is a big vector of attack, and always has been and always will be. But now you've got this network-based attack happening again, and it's being enabled again, not because the devices themselves are weak, but because they have vulnerabilities. And what this article talks about in Dark Reading is that there's also another level of difficulty in figuring out when those attacks happen, because it's not like an endpoint where you can go out, and y'all know this very well. You can't go out and get a bunch of forensics off of it like you can on an endpoint. It's really, really hard to do. Hard to put agents on those things. It's, and then whoever's making that firewall doesn't want to give up their intellectual property to allow you to get access to these things. So that's what the whole article is about, is there's just a lot of malware attacks, are not malware, but vulnerabilities being used on security devices themselves. And it's really hard to do forensics on those devices. And Sam knows a lot about this too, because it's really hard to do forensics in the OT space. You can't get access to those devices. So I just thought it was interesting. That kind of, summarizes what it's about. Rachel, Mac, I don't know which one of you want to start on that, but what did you think about the article, and does anything stand out to you there?
Yeah, I just thought that just in terms of edge devices on their own, like you were saying, it's kind of going back to not just endpoints. And I wondered, it kind of started making me think about how many more things that we're connecting to the network, right? Like now you have thermostats, you have rogue APs, you have printers, things like that. They're a little bit harder to nail down about who owns them, what's the security on them, what's going on. But yet they're so close-knitly tied to the same network and the same range as like all of our important devices, right? So you might have like a thermostat that's sitting on the same range as like our endpoints or something like that, because I feel like businesses are still getting used to that and getting used to how this is kind of developing and the Internet of Things and things like that. And I just started thinking about that when I was reading over it, how it's just, there's such a broad spectrum of, I guess, everything to monitor, and how you're supposed to do that, and how you're supposed to apply security to it all, and also get all of the logs, right? Like there's this idea in security that everyone wants a data lake. Everyone wants to be able to monitor all of the things and have access to all the things and visibility to all the things. But how do we do that? And that was kind of my initial thoughts after reading it. Rich, I don't know if you kind of were on that same page.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about like how I think it's also kind of rising in popularity because of how stealthy it can be, because not a lot of people are going to have strict monitoring of a lot of these devices all the time for like what's actually being exploited. You're just going to see immediate bad when you do, if you see it in time, like on that lateral movement piece usually, or like I saw, a big part of the vulnerabilities was like for like file share software. So if it's already on your file share server and they're just already able to grab sensitive information without even moving laterally, you might not see it at all because they got that and they left.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things they talk about is attackers move to less visible environments. It's like an immediate, the dwell time is going down because they're able to get in and out quicker and get that stuff done. So it's going to take longer for you to detect them in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that went into their stats. They had a lot of stats on like external detection versus like internal detection. And I wonder if that went into that external detection statistics on the fact that by the time we're seeing it, it's already exploited. There is no like, oh, something's sitting there.
Yeah, I think that was like part of the accounting of it was they get notified once they get the ransom note, basically. Like that's part of the external alerting, I think, was, oh, well, they got the ransomware group let them know, basically. So that's how they found out.
Yeah, there was, and bringing this full circle, because we are talking about perimeter, right? So I had to throw that in there. Mm-hmm. The Arcane Door thing that just came out, Dalos had a good article about that was just released the other day, but also focused on that perimeter thing, right? And I think just across the board, seeing more of that. And to Mac's point of increasing attack surface with all little gadgets and widgets and things that we like to put in for convenience or otherwise, and then combining some of these environments between, a lot of us work from home. So which one's your professional? How many of you out there have your professional networking stuff on a professional segregated part of the network versus all your TVs and thermostat and everything else, right? Not a lot of people do that, right? So that it doesn't help.
Well, but even if you do, like, I mean, in an attack chain scenario, I mean, it's not too far fetched to think like I've got my router segmented from my wireless network. So you got to have, it's connected to that. So I don't have the same device with a wireless as I do my router at my house. And I do have all of my little IoT things segmented off. But if there's an attack chain of 2 vulnerabilities on each one of those devices, which is not that far-fetched, then it doesn't matter. Once they get in and take advantage of that vulnerability, they can get anywhere in that device. And if you've got both of those in one device, then you're even more kind of hosed, right? Because they're taking advantage immediately. You don't have to have an attack chain. You just get that vulnerability, you get in. You can have that, because most home networks aren't going to have 15 switches and stuff. Mac and Rachel might, but I don't do that anymore. I don't geek out like that like I used to. But it's just not a far-fetched scenario to know. And then if that vulnerability is in that device, then segmentation matters not, right? It's gonna you're messed up. So
yeah, I mean, even if you go back to, let's just say you're trying to detect like unfamiliar logins to things, something as simple as that. But with the work from home scope or work from anywhere scope being so large, it's like, let's say you're tracking just like login agents, right? You're just the agent. Well, someone's switching Chrome browsers. Someone's going to a coffee shop. Someone's working at their aunt's house, their uncle's house. Like they're, with their friends doing a work. Like there's just so many factors that play into that it's like whack-a-mole at times too, where it's like, security becomes harder on that front as well.
Absolutely.
And VPN, let's like tacking onto that. Like if you don't have control over, like you let your people, you like NordVPN, you don't lock it down to like one corporate VPN. I mean, good luck trying to find the bad IP address in there if it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, and that's their point. It's stealthy environments. It's hard to get to. You have no way to get. It's hard to get logs off of a firewall and get forensics off of a firewall that you own, much less trying to go into a Starbucks coffee shop and get it off of their stuff. So that's why you have to rely on the endpoint. So Anyway, well, I thought it was an interesting article. It's again, I see them as cyclical. I thought we had the network locked down, man. I thought it was, we're good. Now here we got to worry about it again. So, all right. Well, we'll call that article done. As usual, we like to scare everybody to death with our articles. So be on the lookout for that stuff. Now we are going to take a quick break. And on the other side of the break, we will talk about Rachel and Mac. We'll talk about their history, what got them into cyber, and then we'll talk about their talk at HOU.SEC.CON 2023. I don't know why my years are messed up right now. So
it's hard.
All right. See you on the other side of the break. And we are back from the break. Thanks for everybody for sticking with us through that news article and all the HOU.SEC.CON segment updates. Now we get to talk to Rachel and Mac, and we get to talk about their history as much as they want to share. And maybe nothing nefarious, any jail time, anything like that. Don't let us know about that. And then we'll get into your talk as well. So, Rachel, you're at the top of my screen, so I'm going to start with you. Why don't you give us kind of a quick rundown on what got you into cybersecurity and what you do there at Red Canary?
Yeah, so first got started in cyber about 7 years ago. I worked at a drilling company in the incident response sector, but kind of also was just a general security admin. So got a lot of experience just from like getting to do hands-on stuff as like, this is what day in the life of like general IT admin, trying to be as secure as, and also when really bad stuff happens, you're hands-on responding and trying to remediate. So I stayed there for about 4.5 years and then jumped over to Red Canary about 2 years, it's like 2 years, 8 months ago now. So it's flown by. I started out as a DE or detection engineer there. I'm still in detection engineering. And the job's kind of changed a lot, honestly, over the course of my time here. Because as you've probably seen in trends, a lot of threats are moving away from just endpoint. And now we're trying to detect all the things and all the different attack vectors. So, when I first started, I was really heavily focused in Windows, but now I'm also kind of day-to-day trying to learn about cloud threats and identity threats. And I think that's kind of what led us to our interest in talking about business email compromise. Spoiler alert if you didn't know our talk yet. But yeah, so that's kind of day-to-day what we do. We're just looking at all the trending threats, what we can do to detect all the things.
So you're detecting all the things, but are you trying to detect it in real time? Are you threat hunting along with it when stuff happens that you're going back and look at it, or kind of what's your day-to-day like there?
So we have specifically threat hunters that will be more proactive in doing that. Day-to-day, we're also working our analysis queue. So I think it can be very helpful as a detection engineer if you're also consuming your own detection logic and like analyzing those alerts, because then, you're going to be quick to like, hey, if that's noisy, I'm going to stop that and cut it down instead of suffering. If you can do that. So a lot of it is also the analysis portion. And then we also get a lot of like, if a new vulnerability comes out, Intel is quick to be like, hey, we need to get some detection logic in ASAP. This is in the wild right now. Let's get it rolling. And so then we drop, everything, make that detection logic so we can tell our customers, hey, we got you. We will detect if this happens. We'll have our threat hunting team run retroactive hunts. So kind of day in the life there is just, it could change in an instant, honestly, depending on what's happening that day.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Mac, you see that too, like as a kind of a feedback loop from your threat hunters. They're doing something, they know something's popping up, or you've got some intel that's showing a certain type of attack that's hitting a certain industry, and you've got a customer in that industry. So you're doing proactive stuff. You see that feedback loop on a pretty daily basis, huh?
Yep. And then we try to not only go after like specific threat actors, but just behaviors in general. Because a lot of times, right, like if our detector logic is broad enough, it's going to catch a lot. And that's what we're hoping to do, and then tune from there. And we also get, like, while we are doing like our analyst work, so as we're going through some of the events and looking into it, we might find our own indicators of compromise as well. And then we're also using that for intel.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you're developing your own indicators of compromise. I got you.
Yeah. Okay. So like on top of our threat hunters going out, searching for it, figuring out what's bad, right? And telling us, we're also looking at events. And if something strikes us as like, ooh, that is showing up quite a bit, or like that file is not doing great things, we're going to also note that as well.
Gotcha.
Across everyone. So, yeah.
So do you have a lot of your own detection tools? You use a lot of open source detection tools as well, kind of a combination of both, or?
It's a combination of both. We love our own detection logic. As detection engineers, we write it all. And we, like Rachel mentioned, we consume it ourselves. So we're testing it. We're reducing false positives where we can. And we also have faith in it, right? Because as detection engineers, we're researching the behaviors behind it, the threats that happen from whatever we're searching for. We're narrowing it down as much as we can. And we also have seen it in the wild. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If you don't have faith in your own detection logic, then you've got
for sure. Yeah. We're very confident.
So Matt, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into cyber and how you got here today at Red Canary.
Yeah. I feel pretty lucky because I kind of stumbled into cybersecurity, and I feel like from what I've heard, it's a very hard industry to break into, which surprised me a little bit because I started out as an intern for a major healthcare system here in Michigan. And I was doing a bunch of different things. So I started out with just like your typical IT. And then I moved into like Scrum and the programming behind that. And then I actually had this cybersecurity manager come up to me and be like, hey, you want to know what I feel like would be really fun for you to look at? Pen testing. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that kind of sounds fun. And so I got to work with their team a little bit during that internship and start web app pen testing, which so cool, right? Like, I feel like Red Team gets a lot of people's interest in cybersecurity. And so I did that for a while, loved it. And then figured out that once you join a security team in a business, you start doing all of the things. So that's when I kind of got to get my toes wet and dipped into a bunch of different aspects of cybersecurity and doing that. And then 2 years ago, a little over 2 years now, but I also started at Red Canary as a detection engineer. And like Rachel said, it's changed a lot just in 2 years. And a lot of times I feel like, I make fun of like my parents and things like that for being like, oh, back in my day, things like that. But I'm saying that about my job. I'm like, oh, the interns come on or new people get onboarded. And I'm like, oh, well, back in my day when I started, it was like 2 years ago.
That's what you say to Jonathan. For you who don't know, we had somebody who tried to break into our stream here. That was from their team accidentally. We don't want to get into the full explanation, but Jonathan's an intern. So Mac is going to Jonathan and going, look, you little whippersnapper, quit trying to break into our stream.
Yeah, but it is crazy. And like Rachel touched on, like, people want more, right? Businesses want more visibility into their systems, into like we said, network things like that. And we're having to kind of broaden our scope of work, broaden what we're looking for. And like Rachel said, we focused primarily on Windows when we came on. And now it's like, there's all the things. We have cloud, we have Linux, we have Mac. Like we're have to learn all the things. We have to make sure we're protecting all the things and constantly keeping up on research and things of that sorts.
Yeah. It doesn't take long to have a lifetime in security, cyber, right? Mm-hmm. And to Michael's point on the earlier segment of it's cyclical. And it's always something. While it's always something new, it's always the same thing at the same time, yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that does keep us all interested and intrigued on what it doesn't. The job doesn't get boring. Let's put it that way.
No, right? Not at all. Yeah. It's funny that you say that. Rachel and I really enjoy giving talks. We are probably the detection engineers who do the most of that. Because it's really fun. But in doing so, we research a lot, right? Because we want to make sure that we are giving the people who come to our talks the most updated information. And sometimes, like, we'll write a talk. Let's say we have a talk at the end of the month. We'll write that talk first week. And then we have to go back every week and slowly start changing things because, it's evolving just as fast as that. Right. And so that was really interesting. We recently did a talk. It was Barbie themed. So all of our talks tend to have interesting themes, right? So at HOU.SEC.CON, our theme was business email compromise, and it was the office.
The office. So, I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
I really love
it
that.
It keeps your attention, right? So we did a Barbie theme, and we kind of went over some of the top trending threats that Red Canaries reported on in our threat detection report. And we had to go back like 3 or 4 times because they were just evolving so fast. And they're minor things, right? Like the majority of it stays the same, but the minor things that we have to tune our detection logic just a little bit to make sure that we're catching it all. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I literally gave last week or the week before last a security trends talk for a customer of ours, just 30 minutes. It was during like lunchtime while they were in their tabletop exercise. And I gave that, and there's something I've already had to update because I'm going to keep that talk because I liked putting it together. There's already something I have to update in the AI space that I talked about because you can't have a talk today without saying AI. And it's literally already something has changed, and it's not a minor thing. I mean, it's kind of a major thing. Some new tools have come out, stuff like that. So it's like, good gracious, am I ever going to be able to give a real updated talk? And people make fun of people who do talks for updating their slides, 30 minutes before the talk. And we actually get aggravated because it's like, no, you can't make any changes to your slides. We've already got it uploaded. But it's like, well, but a new attack just came out. Like we've got to, it's like, sorry, there's only so much we can put into this thing. But I get it.
I'm waiting for the submittal that actually real time is updating their slides during their talk. I'm waiting for that one.
I could see that happening. Literally, like right there, escape, put something new in.
Yeah, presentation.
Yeah. That would be fun. Like if you made that, actually did that, had some people from the audience yelling out things and you updated your slides right then. But
some people call that capture the flag, but just saying.
No, that could be that too. Yeah, that's a good point.
An interactive presentation.
Well, thanks for going over your backgrounds. Sam and I are the, 2 old guys that you're talking about. And now you're feeling like the old folks in there talking to your interns and stuff. So we get that very well. We understand that. We're very much get off our lawn kind of guys sometimes, but we appreciate the background.
We appreciate you visiting the old folks home, by the way, today.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks for talking to us old dudes here. But no, seriously, I love the background. We always want to get people's takes on, what gets them excited. And the fact that you said that both of you do any kind of pen testing, and there's so many, I think, younger, even, like teenagers and stuff that watch movies and they think, oh, pen testing is going to be me doing all these really cool things and all this stuff. And you get in there and you're just looking at logs and you're doing all of this stuff. And it's actually the fact that you still enjoyed it says a lot about your geekness, right? You're like, you really do like doing this stuff. So that's really cool. Well, let's talk about your talk. Let's talk about business email compromise. Whichever one of you wants to summarize it, or y'all can do it together. I have a feeling you two probably complete each other's sentences.
Sometimes.
What would you give a quick summary of what you talked about? I mean, I think a lot of people, and maybe that we shouldn't have that assumption. Tell us what business email compromise is, and then kind of get into your talk, and we'll just discuss it.
Yeah, I guess I'll do what is business email compromise, and then if Rachel wants to take over of like another little synopsis. So. Business email compromise, it's a cyber attack. So when criminals gain access to a company's email or through a company's email system, so like adversaries are going to use that to scam employees into making unauthorized transactions, sharing sensitive information, or it could even go as far as like downloading malware, right? And I think that it's pretty common to hear in cybersecurity that like your weakest line of defense and the most important line of defense that you need to do educate is your people, right? So it's not, it's not uncommon, but it makes sense of why they would go after business email compromise, right? Because you are kind of relying on an aspect of social engineering, or like maybe expecting a user to make a mistake, click something, open something, download something, or trust, right? Trust something else is coming in, what could be imitated as another person. So that's kind of a gist of what is business email compromise.
Yep. And also part of, why we wanted to even talk about this in the first place is about 1.5 years ago, I'd say now, Red Canary started being like, okay, we needed to detect email compromise. We needed to detect identity compromise. So we went through a period of trying all of these different detection logic, trying to figure out how do we do this. And, at first you get a lot of false positives. It's hard to do wide scale. When you have so many identities, you're trying to pick out which one's the compromised one. It takes a bit. But after trying for, I don't know, probably took us 6 months to a year to really nail down good detection logic. And once we get that and we feel like, oh, wow, look, we're doing it. We kind of cracked the code to figure out what these compromised accounts do, what it looks like, the signs leading up to it. That was like, hey, let's talk about this. This is something every company experiences. And if we can, let them know the things that we see and what's worked well for us, hopefully somebody can take something back with them. And so that's kind of also our talks. Every time we try to think of one, we try to get actionable items to send people home with. So, it's not just another talk where you're ranting and you're like, oh, well, this is everywhere and it sucks and you're going to be attacked and it's inevitable. We want you to at least know, be scared, but you can do something about it too.
That's always the hardest part of a talk, right? Is actually not getting up and just saying doom and gloom and FUD, right? It's here's how you actually fix these things. That means you put real work into your talk, not just here's a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's nice because it's kind of the company culture of Red Canary is we don't black box anything, right? We want the people that we're connecting with to have the tools to prevent and detect things. We want them to be, safe. And we think that's pretty cool at our company. So it's kind of just something we've then taken into our talks is hey, we have open source things for you to go look at, obviously the Atomic Red team, but we're going to give it to you because that's the kind of people that we are, and I think that's huge with cybersecurity.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they let you do a talk, some companies lock that down almost completely. They don't want people to talk about any of that stuff for fear of, but the fact that they're open to letting you go out and, grow your own brand and then give other people information like that is awesome. That's a very good culture. I like that.
So, Rachel, you had mentioned legacy authentication, right? And part of that, and when I was looking through when I was going through the presentation, some of those things were I wasn't thinking of. And there were two big things for me that that legacy authentication was one of them. The other one was something so simple, but I wasn't thinking about this, and that was a detection through email rules, right? And because we all use email rules probably more or less, but we really don't think of those, right, as part of that potential threat, right? And I mean, can you expand a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, email rules is something, I don't know that we go a day without seeing a compromised account making an email rule anymore. And it's also, that was a hard one to nail down exactly, adversary versus legitimate email rules. You'd be surprised how many people are making email rules for specific coworkers to just send their emails to the junk folder automatically.
I never do that to Sam. I never do that to Sam.
Well, not only that, but you have to think about, one of the I guess detections that we kind of come up with is we're looking for simple email rules, right? So one letter, 2 or 3 letters, or just what do you call that? Semicolon, something like that. But then think about out of office. You know how many out of office replies you get? So then normal people will name their email rule OOO. Mm-hmm. So it's little things like that where it's you really have to dive in deeper or you won't notice what's abnormal versus normal.
Yeah.
Do you think with the advent, so it's like anything, right? Business email compromise it's not exactly the same as phishing, even though it has an element to it, right? But it's
phishing would be the initial access, I would say.
Yeah,
you're looking for those initial access to that business email compromise, right? That's their way in. It's a phishing email, one of them, obviously.
But that's to your point on the detections being harder and having to go deeper into it, there are some things that have for a long time with email rule creation or with phishing that we've been able to kind of train our users to go, look for bad grammar, look for this, look for that. But now AI is making that more difficult. That's one of the trends I actually talked about that customer was that it's harder to detect those things. You see that potentially having the same effect with rule creation as well?
Well, I think they're getting smarter, right? But I think rule creation versus like that AI factor is a tiny bit different. Sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, I was going to say the same thing. Like, I would say once they're in the inbox, they don't really care so much about like what comes out. Like, I don't think that they're going to try to be like, if it was something that's more targeted, more advanced, they probably would. But usually once they're in the inbox, they're just like, okay, I'm going to send out additional internal phishing emails. I'm going to send everything that this person gets in a reply to their deleted items folder. So they don't ever see people saying, hey, I don't think this, like, I think you're a hack. They will never get the reply themselves because they're not going to go look in the deleted items folder. So I think, if you know what folders to look into as well, like the RSS feeds, that's nobody looks there unless you're like a super nerd that actually uses the RSS feeds folder. Like 99% of people aren't going to do that. And so I think adversaries are still going to use those built-in folders. And if you're looking for that kind of interaction with an email rule, then I don't think that'll change.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And we state in our talk, we're like, the most important, email rule operations to watch are new inbox rule, set inbox rule, remove, disable. And we go through all those like, that's actually a lot.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot there, right? It's like, the most important ones. Well, those are a lot of them. So it's like narrowing that down,
Yeah. I mean, if you've compromised the email inbox, I mean, that to me, that's like the ultimate living off the land, right? I mean, you're just using something that is completely legitimate to do very illegitimate things. And unless you're a detection engineer, to your point, going in and looking for these things specifically, then there's nothing to really set off alarm bells. I mean, you've got to be somebody who's going and trying to find these things. And to them, it's like, how much is that is really going to happen? So, yeah, interesting.
And we have some during the talk, we did mention some different prevention mechanisms that we, outside of just monitoring for those, right? Like Rachel talked a lot about disabling legacy authentication, creating those conditional access policies. So requiring a device to be marked compliant, having trusted locations, if you can narrow that down. I know, again, we've talked a lot about working remote and working from anywhere has kind of made that more difficult, but then also ensuring all accounts have multi-factor authentication enabled and things like that.
But I mean, all of that goes back to what it's basics. It's things you should be doing anyway. I mean, how many companies don't have any kind of DMARC set up, don't have any kind of email security really set up that goes beyond just basic authentication, and how many don't have MFA still? I think that's what Sam was talking about earlier. It's still so much of that comes back to doing basic things.
Mm-hmm. And I suddenly feel the urge to stop the webcast right now and go check my email rules. And, I think I'm going to start looking at my sent box more often than I am my inbox. So,
we had a few people raise their hands, and we're like, question? I'm going to do this. And we're like, okay, good. Right.
I need those slides, please, because I'm going to do that right after we get done.
Yeah. The phones all come out and they're taking pictures.
Yeah. Oh, that's always a good sign when you start seeing people take pictures of your slides. You're like, okay, good. I mean, they care about something that I'm talking about.
Or they're about to just recreate your entire talk for themselves. One of the two.
Well, this whole industry, I mean, IT systems in general, cyber benefits from the fact that we just keep putting more and more on top of older stuff, like your point of legacy authentication, right? We just keep putting more and more and more stuff on top of it. We're not looking backwards to see what we've done in the past and what we should clean up, what is superfluous. And I mean, there's a lot of good reasons to do it, cyber just being one of them, but it's also business efficiency in many cases too, right? So, but yeah, really good points too, because that really raised my eyebrow too when I'm starting to read through some of those legacy authentication slides you had in there. And I guess it was authentication in the middle. Was that the term that you were using?
Yeah, the adversary in the middle. That's been really popular too, because then you don't even need a password. Like you can just have that session token, and user just doesn't know about it. They just get sent away to a page that's like, okay, I guess that login failed. Let me go log in again.
Yeah. I mean, you just start over, right? Oh, I had no idea. You just don't even know.
And it's kind of ironic that we spent a few minutes or some time talking about that article and, exploiting vulnerabilities. And here we are like exploiting the people, right? So just like those 2 points of entry where one is like, okay, but they both have the same outcome. But here, especially with this business email compromise and phishing and all of that, we're relying on, a user to slip. Little slip up there,
People are the ultimate vulnerability. Absolutely.
Yes. Agreed.
Imperfect humans. Well, Rachel, Mac, I really appreciate y'all joining us. I say this in a lot of them, but we could talk about this forever. But we unfortunately do have to stop at some point. So really appreciate y'all. First of all, coming to speak at HOU.SEC.CON. Really do appreciate that. And we'll put a link out to your talk. We've already got it out on YouTube, so people will be able to go look at that. And any parting thoughts,
Rachel?
I mean, it's been fun. This is a good talk. I could obviously talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, please come back next year. We've already said that. We'd love you to come back next HOU.SEC.CON. Submit. So
awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being on here. Sam, anything to close us down here?
Yeah, to everybody and anybody listening, go check your email rules.
So true. Go listen to this talk and take Rachel and Mac's advice and make sure you check everything out. I agree wholeheartedly. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us on episode 19, and we'll see you. Golly, episode 20. It's going to be crazy. See you then.